Some scary stuff that like about me that I don't really like to talk about openly, because when you talk about scary stuff about yourself openly, then it like brings it all to actuality, right? It makes it true. I like to be right. And when I say that, I mean I really like to be right. You know, I joke with my friends who will, like say things to me. You were right when you said blah, 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 or whatever. I joke with them by saying, and don't you forget it, I even tell them, and it's just us, so you're not going to tell anybody, right? Like, okay. I even tell them that there are people in this world who hate to say, I told you so, and then there's me. Now, I know not the most helpful most of the time, not the most flattering thing for me to tell you, especially when there are cameras pointed at me and it's something that's going to live on the internet forever. And maybe now you're all looking at me differently. And maybe I earned that. And though I know how terrible all of that can sound, I think we all enjoy being right. Now, maybe not to the degree that I enjoy being right. Maybe not out loud by telling a person, I told you so. Maybe not by reminding someone that you had, said that thing that they had to learn the hard way. Maybe for you, it's just deep down in your heart and you never let it see the light of day, but it's there. And enjoying being right about something isn't really a problem. But a problem comes when being right is the ultimate priority in our lives. That problem comes then when we add people into this equation, the people that are around us, when we add them into this equation. Now, last week, we introduced the idea that the scary stuff in life comes when we move towards the mess in life. Basically, when we look at something or someone that doesn't fit into our safe little bubble, no matter what that little bubble consists of, and then we have to respond to that stuff. Now, ultimately, we said that we're all messy, and when we realize that, then we will move towards the messes in life that are around us, people, relationships, social issues. We will move towards those things more rather than just judging them from afar, right? Or writing people off, or just staying so busy that we don't actually have to mess with any of the mess. And Jesus, last week, we kind of introduced this opening act of his famous address that we lovingly call the Sermon on the Mount. He gave us this list, and he said, if you want true happiness, true long-lasting happiness in life, you'll find it through, and he introduces this word, beatitudo. Beatitudo. Or the happiness that comes from seeing the good in others and doing good for others. It's an other regarding action that takes place. And Jesus' list that he gave us, it consisted of things like leveraging who we are for other people, exercising meekness when it is needed in life, wanting true righteousness, not just self-righteousness, showing mercy through repeated forgiveness into someone's life, being pure in heart and pure in our motives, and not taking offense to persecution or insults if they come our way because we're acting like the real Jesus, not just who we've made him up to be. But as we continue in this famous sermon, in this famous speech, Jesus starts to dig in more on who we should be as people who desire to follow him with our lives. And I have to say, it's uncomfortable. It's full of ideas that can already tell you, I'm not like really sure what he fully means, what Jesus fully means. But I'll warn you up front, okay? Jesus, definitely means business with those of us who say that we are his followers. And if you're in the room or if you're watching online today here with us and you're not sure about this following Jesus thing, let me tell you that I'm not speaking directly to you today. But I hope that what I have to say, that it will resonate with you. I hope you will see the high bar, the high standard that Jesus has set for his followers, and how we as human beings have really messed it up. So if you're not into that, Christian, follower of Jesus, like ranks or anything right now. You get to be an onlooker today as we are challenged by the words of Jesus. So in chapter 6 of this letter that Matthew writes, Jesus makes this very perplexing statement that is still very relevant to us today. And I want to look at this statement, and then I want to work backwards from that statement. So here's what Jesus says, starting in verse 14 of Matthew 6. He says, "For if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you." Seems very cause and effect, right? Cause and effect. Which again, I can't tell you what this truly, ultimately means. I think I can say, though, with absolute certainty, that Jesus takes forgiveness very seriously. And he proves that he takes it very seriously in verse 15 when he says, "But if you do not forgive others their sins, your Father will not forgive your sins." Jesus didn't leave us to wonder if the transverse operation of this sentence was true. He didn't leave it to the imagination or leave us wondering if it works in reverse there. He says it straight out, which again, I can't say with certainty that you can't be forgiven by God if you don't forgive. But I can imply here that Jesus' standard, right? Again, Jesus' standard, very high, is that his followers should be known for their forgiveness. And I believe he makes these statements as a follow-up to something that he said earlier on in this chapter, just earlier on in this talk for him. Something that many of us have heard, and some of us have maybe even said about religious or church people, something that is fair, honestly, but it's very unsettling. And I want to encourage you, everyone in the room online, I want to encourage you guys to go and to read this stuff for yourself. Matthew chapter 6, really Matthew 5, 6, and 7. Read the whole thing for yourself. And when you do, when you read Matthew chapter 6, you will see that Jesus, just before this, he was actually talking to these early followers, and he was teaching them like how to pray. He was giving them an example of how to pray. Because up until that point, for them, they had just gone to the temple, and they would repeat these things over and over and over again. And if you grew up Catholic, you may have a sense of what that's like. Now, though Jesus was introducing a new way in this point to communicate with God, but right before he does that is when he says something that points to what we just read. Something that could easily get disconnected, could get lost, separated by what we call the Lord's Prayer. You may have seen it like at your grandma's house, okay? He says, "When you pray, do not be like the hypocrites." And what Jesus is saying right here, he's telling us to check our hearts, not our physical beating hearts. He's talking about the intangible thing inside of us that breaks over loss, that goes out to people when they are hurting, and that we give away when we fall in love. Because we don't literally like break our beating hearts when someone has a loss. We don't take our heart and like mail it to Florida because they had a hurricane, right? That'd be creepy. Or, stick it in a card to someone that we love. "I love you, here's my heart." There's this intangible thing that Jesus talks about actually a lot. But it's so difficult for us as human beings to guard this intangible thing. Because we're told as kids, right, to watch what we say and what we do. We learn in life to manage our emotions, to manage our behaviors, especially when we're around like certain people or in certain like places. We learn without being told to most of the time. We learn how to make everything look really good on the outside. But Jesus says there's a heart to this thing. There's a heart to following me, and it's the most important thing. And if you don't watch it, if you don't guard it, if you don't filter what goes in and comes out of it, you'll become a hypocrite. And you'll find yourself doing stuff like what those hypocrites of that time did, stuff like this, because it says that, "For they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners." And why do they love to pray in those places? what would be their motivation for doing this at all? Well, for some of you, the answer to why would they do this is actually your worst nightmare. Because for the religious hypocrites, for the Pharisees of this day, for the guys that knew all this stuff and everything, the answer is to be seen by others. That's why. They wanted to be seen, they wanted to be heard by others. And in 2022, in 2022, you may see someone on a street corner being loud about something religious or otherwise. You may see someone in a public place, like, because that's what the synagogue really represented in this moment, was just like this, the center of culture, the center of the town, the center of where everybody was at. You know, you may see someone being loud in a public place, but in our 21st century version of this would be social media. And I think if Jesus was saying like this today, he would say it like this. He would say, and when you post, do not post like the hypocrites, for they love to tease on Twitter and frustrate on Facebook and basically upset on every platform. Now, I obviously can't prove that that's what Jesus would say, but I think I'm right. But seriously, how many times have we watched people get hypercritical, loudly religious, and politically extreme in all kinds of directions? I'm not even pointing in a direction on social media. Sometimes even leveraging Jesus for their own personal agenda. Again, no matter what your political leaning may be. And a global pandemic didn't make that any better. It only worsened the issue. And Jesus looks at what's going on in that culture, and he looks at what's going on in our culture, and he wraps up this thought in his day and in his time and his situation, and he speaks directly into our day and our time and our situation. And I think it fits perfectly. And he wraps it up by saying, truly, truly I tell you, they have received their reward in full. Because their reward is people's attention. Their reward is people's reactions. Their reward is feeling superior. Their reward is winning an argument by being the loudest voice in the argument. And that was true then, and it's still true now. But that reward is not coming from Jesus. And maybe for you right now, there's this internal tension inside of you. There's this thing that you're feeling. You know, you've done all of the reading. Maybe for you, you know all of the theology. You have like this 90 to 99% feeling inside of you that you're right. And you believe that you're justified in speaking the truth. But before you go there, like just stop yourself for a second and let me remind all of us what Paul, like years later, said based off of Jesus' teachings and the life that Jesus had lived to all the people of that time. Paul writes these things to the church, the group of people who were learning to, and wanting to live the life of Jesus in a place called Corinth. Paul writes this in what we Christians have come to call the love chapter in 1 Corinthians 13. And here's what he writes, and pay really close attention to this and feel the tension inside of here when you think about like being a follower of Jesus and being in society today. And sit in the tension for a second. Here's what he says. If I speak in the tongue of men or angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. So think about that. I can speak in all kinds of languages. I mean, that's a really smart person who understands a lot. But without love, Paul says, they're just a loud noise. He goes on. Sorry, it doesn't get any better. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. I can see into the future. I can solve all the problems. I understand all of the things that surround all this. I have all that knowledge. And on top of it, I have this extreme faith. But without love, if I do not have love, I am nothing. He goes on and says, if I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardships that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. I'm a very giving person. In fact, I give to the point that I don't even have enough for myself. I have nothing. But I don't have love. Paul says, you're not coming out ahead. You're not winning here. And why? Why is it that this is the case? Why does this require so much of us? Because, Paul says, love is patient, love is kind. Love does not envy, and it does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Love always protects, always trusts. Don't like that one. Always hopes, always perseveres. And the part that we love to quote, love never fails. Listen, guys, if God is love, and Jesus was the physical embodiment of that love, and we are to be the followers and the current living examples of that same love, then everything we say and everything we do, basically everything, and I know how terrible that sounds, everything matters. And it must be filled and fueled by God's love. And just to make sure that we got the point in this, Paul throws it back to the beginning of this whole idea, and he says, but where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will all pass away. And why? We introduced this last week if you were here with us. If not, go back and look at it. Why? Because oida, the Greek's word to know information, oida only goes so far. It may make us the smartest person in the room to have all the knowledge, but the other word that they had, gnosko, to understand the recognition of truth from experience, it's the key to the heart. Knowledge may help us win an argument, but gnosko, experience, connected to the beatitudo, the other regarding action, that helps us win the person with the relationship. That allows us to experience God as we forgive others because God forgave us. You forgive to the degree that you realize that you have been forgiven. That helps us to live in humility as we approach people that we disagree with. That enables us to show love when even when, and really most especially when it's hard and we disagree with someone. And listen, you have the right to say whatever you want. You have the right to say what you want wherever you want. You have the right to say it whenever you want to. But true followers of Jesus, we give up our rights because we realize that we have a responsibility. And I have the responsibility as a human, but even more so as a follower of Jesus, to think about how those things that I say and do are going to affect other people. And we have to realize that we can never unhitch responsibilities from those rights. We fight too much for our rights and give up too many of our responsibilities. And it's important because responsibilities are always about other people. And so is Jesus. He's always about other people. For some of us, that responsibility may not be about not being boisterous or inflammatory with things that we say. It may mean that we just don't retreat out of culture so we can feel safe. It may mean that we create some margin, some space in our schedule to be able to put ourselves in position to love people who are nothing like us. It's important for us to realize that Jesus has empowered us to be at the center of cultural change, not because we're the loudest, not because we're the rightest, not because we're the most biblicalist voice in the room or online, not because we have all of the answers, but because we're filled with humility and we're filled with love for people. We're available to people. We're seeking to understand, not just thinking that we already understand. As followers of Jesus, we need to bring back the lost art of healthy conflict, the acceptance of respectful disagreement, the love-filled debate. Because I believe that, and I truly believe this, that humble passion will always outpace privilege, and it will ultimately cultivate faithfulness inside of us. Humble passion will always outpace privilege, and ultimately it will bring out faithfulness. So, let me ask some annoying questions to those of us that are followers of Jesus in the room. Where do you need to prioritize relationship over being right? Where do you need to prioritize a relationship over being right? Where do you need to win a friend instead of trying to win an argument? Where do you need to engage humbly with coworkers and neighbors and family members to forgive them, to love them where they are at, to be a true picture of Jesus to the culture that is around us? Second question. Where do you need to disengage because it tempts you into being nothing like Jesus? And I'm talking about things like 24-hour news cycle that gets you all like hot and bothered every morning. Social media that you infinitely scroll through and see things that just tick you off. Maybe a group of friends for you that improperly lead you. They lead you towards talking about someone rather than talking to them, making something worse rather than making it better. Where do you need to disengage? And for those of you who are here and you've kind of sat and listened to all this and you're seeking, you like Jesus, but you're not so sure about this church thing or, his followers. You're just not sure about that whole thing. I hope that you will take away from this today just how seriously that we around here want to take our vision to be a church that unchurched people would love. Because I really believe this is who Jesus was yesterday or all of those years ago. But it's still who Jesus is today. And it's definitely who he will be forever. And he invites us as we follow him to live in the light of that consistent love that he has had for people. So as we wrap up today, I just want to pray, and I want you to take a moment to think about those questions. And then we're going to sing a song that goes right along with this idea, yesterday, today, and forever with Jesus. And then we'll end for the day. Will you pray with me? Jesus, thank you for the example of who you are, what you want for us, that ultimate happiness, but what you desire from us, especially those of us that are your followers. So Jesus, I pray that you would help us to follow you, to not just believe in you, but to follow you into all those messy places. And I ask this in your name. Amen.